Hey everybody, Boris, this is BK Forex. Welcome to the weekly technicals for the majors for Euro dollar, dollar yen, and pound dollar for Feb 4, Feb 8, 2019. The big question in front of us this week is 110 in dollar yen. Is that going to finally break to the upside? We closed out Friday on a very, very positive note in the pair, with dollar yen really taking off after a better than expected non-farm payrolls. Now, the actual figure is going to be a question of debate because non-farm payrolls certainly beat the number tremendously. They came in over 300,000. The market was looking for 150. But the month prior was revised by about 100,000 downward. And there's every suspicion in the world that this month is also going to be revised downward by at least 100,000. Furthermore, the actual average wages increased only by 1/10 of 1%, very, very small amount. I tweeted out last week that everybody's got jobs, but nobody's got money, which seems to be the story of the U.S. economy. None of this, I think, really changes the very dovish stance of the Fed, which is what drove dollar yen below the 109 handle earlier in the week. However, if the labor situation continues to be relatively supportive, the Fed is very likely to resume perhaps shifting from neutral to maybe one, at most two, but certainly possibly one more hike as they continue tightening in the summer. That assumes that essentially U.S. economy stabilizes, global situation, trade situation comes to some kind of a agreement between U.S. and China, and we come out to some sort of an agreement with Brexit. Those are a lot of big ifs, but for now, the market has really been sold out. All of those negative stories have really washed themselves through the market. So if we start next week on a relatively positive note, this 110 level in dollar yen looms very, very large as a key takeout level. We don't necessarily have a lot of data on the market next week. And as far as levels go, we pretty much stayed at the same levels as last week. We just tested them very, very harshly. We tested the 113 in the euro, and we tested the 115 to the upside in the euro as well. In the pound dollar, it's 133, 130, still very much in that area, although pound of all of the majors looks the most fragile, and we'll get to that in just 1 second. But let's just take a look at the calendar here for a second and see what's what's basically on the menu next week. So we don't have that much major economic data, but we do have some that is of pretty serious import. We certainly have the UK PMI services, which is a big, big data point, and looks to be bearish. Kathy is very bearish the number because we came in bearish with the manufacturing. And clearly, the Brexit pall just hangs over UK economy. The really true interesting thing will be, can it hold above the 50 boom bust level? If UK PMI services slips below 50, that's going to be very damaging to cable, and I think it could take the pair all the way down below 30. Going into the middle of the week, nothing much on the majors front. Then into, I think, Thursday, we have the Bank of England meeting. Again, Bank of England is going to be very defensive. It's going to essentially talk about the fact they're preparing themselves for Brexit. They're really not going to be talking about any kind of monetary tightening or response to economic activity because really nobody knows at this point what's going to happen. So that's pretty much it as far as data sets go. We don't have anything else on the majors front. We're going to discuss the commodities in just a minute. UK, the only other thing that may be of note here, European PPI data. We're generally bearish that mildly on European PPI data, although core CPI today came in hotter than expected. So hard to say. There has definitely been a little bit of a decline, I think, in German wholesale price. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact on the euro. The euro is very much trading as the anti-dollar right now. And the fact that it's kind of held bid around these levels, I think, is actually mildly positive. Let's take a look first at the yen, which I think is really the big story of the day. Let me get to today's prices. So we're closing out, as you can see, pretty well. Really, really close to the close of the highs of the day. The big overhead is this whole ceiling of the 109.75 to 110 level, right? I mean, we've basically been failing at that level pretty much half the month of January. Today's price action, very bullish. I mean, this is a big bullish candle. It's almost 100 points, I think. It's closing at the highs of the day. And the critical thing is going to be, do we have some continuity for the next couple of days? We are coming off of pretty oversold levels. The RSI is well below 50. So there's prospect, I think, here for a move, for another potential move to the 110s. At that point, it's going to be all, jury's out as to whether we can hold it. It's going to have to be supported by, I think, better news on the trade front, better news on the risk flows front. But from here to there, there's still potential here to squeeze us a little bit higher. We've been sort of sold off for so long. The shorts are trapped here. If the shorts can get squeezed all the way to 110s, which is like the natural, this is just a natural magnetic level of the longs. The long would love to take the 110s out, if for nothing else, because that's going to squeeze the shorts out. At that point, I think it's going to be much more problematic. But from here to there, there's a pretty reasonable chance that we could make it. So that's setting up as one of the stronger trades into the open of next week. Euro also holding bid really, really nicely. Let me just get rid of comments here. So it would have been more bullish if we could hold, if we could have held the highs here. It would have been really, really bullish if we took out the 115s. The 115 level in the euro is very similar to the 110 level in the yen, in the sense that it's just been a very, very strong resistance zone. Having said this, though, euro came back hard off this support level, and more importantly, has held the 20 SMA for 3 or 4 days. So the only hesitation you hear in my voice is there's just very little positive catalyst on the euro front here, on the economic front. The economic situation is kind of very dire. It really sort of trading right now essentially on the idea that things are going to get a little bit better, that the negotiations with UK could finally resolve themselves to some sort of a positive move. By the way, that's a very key component here. Remember, Brexit is just as bad for Europe as it is for UK. So even though euro has been outperforming pound lately, they both will really, really soar if they can come to some sort of a deal. What's interesting, by the way, is that there is an interesting solution brewing that few people are talking about, put forward by all people, the Germans, which essentially says that instead of trying to negotiate the Brexit divorce deal, UK and Europe actually create a customs union themselves. That is sort of a supranational organization into which UK will be a member, a voting member. This removes a lot of problems, basically, because it essentially says then Ireland doesn't become a big issue. Europe basically and UK kind of negotiated within this larger organization. It saves face for everybody who's a Brexiteer because it shows that UK is autonomous, but in fact, I mean, it's basically essentially keeping Europe in the European Union, but under the auspices of an independent body rather than just simply a bilateral negotiation with Europeans, which kind of marries them to European rules. So it'd be interesting to see if they can do this. There seems to be a lot of support amongst the Remain supporters of Labour for this idea. Basically, it's a face-saving gesture that could save UK from a hard Brexit, which has really become a much more serious problem now than anybody thought would be possible. And that brings me to pound, which at this point, let me get rid of the comments here. Which at this point, remember we talked last week that it was grossly overbought, and I really thought it had to come in. It did come in, but not really significantly. We didn't have much of a correction. It was still considerably far away from the moving average because this big spurt up has really pulled us away. The more interesting point, I think, over here is the fact that cable now, which was relative bid for the last two months or 2 weeks, it was the most dominant of the majors, is now going to become least dominant of the majors because it really topped out on the good news front. They really factored in a lot of the soft Brexit at around the 132, 133 level. Now the market is actually starting to worry that maybe the hard Brexit could be the unwelcome scenario that everybody's afraid of, and that's really putting a damper on UK, a damper on the pound. In addition to which, you're going to get probably negative data, and if you get negative data, that's just going to really push us through this 130 level. Still, the support in cable is this 128.50, 129 level. I don't think that support gets taken out unless we are 100% convinced that UK is going to go to a hard Brexit. But to me, the trade in cable really still, on a relative basis, is a relatively weak trade. The only thing that's positive for those that are getting long cable is the fact that we've just kind of really held above the 30-50 level for 3 or 4 tries, right? We broke out, we kind of held base here. It would be super bullish. I would change my mind completely if on Monday, Tuesday, we came back and actually closed above the highs of this. Then that would really suggest that we could potentially be gearing up for a positive resolution to the whole story and a final burst up to the 134s. But until then, if we start breaking below the 30.50, I think there's a very good chance we're going to probably go to 29.50 before any kind of serious buyers come in and put the bid in. So essentially, that's the story. The big story next week is, can dollar yen take itself to 110? Does euro have enough juice to run to 115s just on pure hope flows? And does cable stabilize, or are we going to get worse? I mean, the situation next week is always going to be very political. If the political news just shows no promise when May goes to Brussels, we could see breaker to 130, and then a breaker to 130 really opens up a run to a minimum, I think, of 129 on the support of this 120 SMA. So that's how the week shapes up. I wish you guys the best of luck, the best trading. Boris, over and out.